But we know that this firm, Silvercore, this was the mercenary firm that was attempting. I don't want to trivialize this, but I did find the phrase "Bay of Chuds" to be funny. This scheme in Venezuela. Look, this guy's in custody in Venezuela, but he is saying that the deal was inked with Juan Guaido. They were coming out of Colombia. The United States, as Guillermo was saying, Pompeo was saying, essentially saying, we have an idea of who funded this. And also, well, we weren't involved with this because obviously if we were involved with this, this would have happened. So essentially using the denial to issue another threat. Now, Brazil Wire and Natalia Urban, who is a very good journalist who also contributes to Brazil Wire. And obviously I do a lot with Brian Mayer, and I also interviewed along with Danny Hunt and Brian. We interviewed Lula together. Natalia has this excellent new report in Brazil Wire just documenting that this same mercenary firm was present on the ground in Brazil during the 2018 election, which of course saw the political imprisonment of Lula, which took him off the ballot, and the election of Jair Bolsonaro, the extremist president of Brazil. This is clip number 7. This is Brian Mayer talking about the reporting on Brazil Wire, explaining it to Telesur. And this is another very important aspect we need to track. As Guillermo pointed out, the role of these mercenary firms is international. They're aggressively used in Africa, and they are great technical, plausible deniability for regime change and coup d'etat attempts like we just saw in the last couple of days in Venezuela. This is Brian Mayer on Telesur.
Brazilian outlet Brazil Wire has reported that Silvercorp USA, the U.S. security company behind this failed operation against the Venezuelan government, was present in Brazil during the 2018 elections. Our correspondent Brian Mayer explains.
A breaking story published in Brazil Wire, the English-language news portal about Brazil by journalist Natalia Urban, shows that Silvercorp USA, the mercenary company that has ties to the Donald Trump administration, which was hired by Juan Guaido to engage in the failed coup d'etat attempt that happened yesterday in Venezuela, was operating in Brazil during the 2018 presidential elections, which saw the rise of right-wing extremist Jair Bolsonaro in the most tumultuous election in Brazilian history. After the leading candidate, who was polling at double the support of anyone else in the race, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, was removed from the election on frivolous corruption charges with no material evidence. Now, at the time of the elections, there were over 50 violent attacks committed across the country by Bolsonaro supporters, including several murders. According to social media postings on Instagram that were subsequently erased, Silvercorp executives claim that they were leaving Brazil after an unspecified amount of time, 11 days after the first round election. So the question is, what were they doing in Brazil? What were they working on, and who hired them?
Those indeed are the questions. And in general, we're going to need to look very, very closely at the role of these mercenary firms in U.S. foreign policy. I mean, everybody knows, Eric Prince is the most infamous example, and Blackwater was key in the Bush administration as a contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, infamously in Iraq, there's the Mysore Square massacre, where Blackwater operatives opened fire on a crowd of Iraqi civilians. I mean, it was basically such a blatant case that they actually faced charges in the United States. And one can only imagine how blatant that is, given the daily and routine brutal violation of and killings of Iraqis and Afghanis. But these firms operate, as Guillermo says, all over Africa. Eric Prince is definitely back at the center of power in the sense of connections to the Trump administration. There was a bizarre proposal that was rejected in the beginning of the Trump administration by the military. Essentially, Bannon and Prince were apparently interested in basically turning over the entire Afghan U.S. troop presence to mercenary contractors. So instead of just them being sort of support, it would essentially just be them as a private army. That was the reporting at the time. And also Eric Prince has definitely been seeking business as well in China and the Gulf. And we see this firm operating across Latin America, including in, again, the Brazilian process, which was not a classical coup, but the war against the Workers' Party and Lula and the process that brought Bolsonaro to power has to be understood as some form of hybrid war and some form of coup. Not in a traditional sense, but it was an illegitimate removal of Dilma. It was an illegitimate process against Lula. And Bolsonaro was somebody who, again, was also framed in the U.S. press as and the Western press as sort of coming out of nowhere. But I have reason to believe that he was not the first choice, because he is crazy and he is an extremist and he makes for bad press. But I think that the interests that wanted a market agenda in Brazil knew that they needed a backup plan if the traditional right-wing parties weren't able to pull it together, and they weren't. And that backup plan was obviously Bolsonaro going back a couple of years.
Yeah, I just like the idea of doing a coup on spec, right? Because we've all been independent contractors before. And the most garbage kind of independent contracting work is on spec, where you do the work. And if they like it, maybe you'll get paid. And it's like the Trumpiest thing ever to do foreign policy that way.
Yeah, I mean, the rates were not that high either.
I would also say that most of the times when you submit something on spec, you don't have encouragement to this extent by Nancy Pelosi.
Here this evening,
Look at
a brave man
Pelosi stands up here,
who carries with him the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of all Venezuelans. Joining us in the gallery is the true and legitimate president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido. Mr. President, please take this message back to your family.
Outrageous. It's outrageous.
I mean,
it's a complete. I mean, look, Bernie Sanders, I guess Gabbard, Ilhan Omar, Ro Khanna. There was a handful of people that even spoke out on this. I mean, this coup project is again more aggressive under Trump, no question. It's a bipartisan project. That's also no question. You have to be adults about this stuff.
What factoring directly into the equations of cowboys like this is the extent to which there's bipartisan support, that if by some miracle they succeeded, they'd be kings right now. Like Pelosi would put a medal around those guys. So whatever, if it wasn't officially sanctioned, if there's no like Pentagon paper that says don't do this, that's not how this works anyway. Like, that's right. If it works, then you take credit for it. If it doesn't work, like look at those clowns.
Exactly. I don't know them. Oh, he did security for me.